Hello and welcome to WoodPods, the podcast designed to share sporting experience and knowledge to instill passion within the NLCS Dubai community on behalf of Team NLCS.
Well, we've had a range of top athletes on the show over the last few weeks, and today we changed tack and moved from performers to professionals as we welcome the British Judo Performance Director, Nigel Donohue. Nigel represented England and won a bronze medal at the 1986 Commonwealth Games in wrestling. Switching sports, Donohue was better known for his participation in judo as he competed at both the 1992 and 1996 Summer Olympics. He was further crowned a European champion in 1995. Now working as the performance director for the British judo team, Nigel provides a great example of how to have a successful career in sport for life. Welcome, Nigel. Thank you so much for giving us your time today to help us connect to the world of judo and working as a performance director for an Olympic sport. So thank you and welcome.
You're welcome.
So let's start at the beginning. How long have you been in the world of judo for?
Well, I started judo when I was 9 years of age in my hometown, which I don't live too far away from just now. In them days, the club was pretty strong. We did both sports, judo and freestyle wrestling. I started at 9 doing judo, and a few months later started wrestling as well. The club coach did both sports. So from a 9-year-old going to a beginner class on a Wednesday night once a week to progressing to judo about 3-4 months later to 3 times a week, and then wrestling not long after to twice a week. Before my 10th birthday, I was training 5 nights a week at the club, plus competing most weekends in a judo or wrestling competition. And we're very much a rugby league area where I live. My brother grew up and ended up being a professional rugby league player, so we played rugby as well. My dad was very much into the rugby, so I feel like a wide range of sports, but quite quickly took to judo and wrestling, enjoyed the sort of combat sports, and never looked back. So I'm 50 now. So what's that, 41 years I've been involved in the sport.
It's a long time. And can you share with us your experience of competing in judo at the Olympics and becoming the European champion in 1995?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you're in your sports and you're growing up, certainly when you first start, you don't know where you're going to get to and how good you particularly are. But I had a good feel for the sport from a very young age. I felt by the time I got to about 13, 14, I knew I was going to do well in the sport, and I knew that I was going to get to Olympic Games. I always had that belief. That's the level I could actually get to. And yeah, I got to Barcelona and Atlanta. Didn't get a medal as much as that was obviously the dream and my goal and my target. Barcelona, I was 22 years of age. I'd been injured quite a lot the year before, tore my pec in the World Championships, and had not the best preparation. But obviously the experience of going to the games was hugely beneficial. And by the time I got to Atlanta in 96, that was the year before I'd been European champion. I was silver medalist that year as well in 96. I was like right up there, and I finished 7th. Put in a good performance, made mistakes on the day. You can't have any regrets in terms of your overall placing. But obviously I would have liked to finish my career with an Olympic medal. So I feel like you've underachieved by not achieving that level, especially when at that stage, 25, 26, I was one of the best in the world in my weight category and just didn't get the goal that I set out to. But yeah, when you look back, going to an Olympic Games, probably when I was younger, took for granted that I was going to get there. But when I look now as a performance director, to qualify for the Games is very difficult, very demanding, and probably a lot harder than what I thought it was when I was competing.
Yeah, absolutely. You stayed very loyal to the sport through this time, and you're now the performance director for the British team. Can you just talk us through? Some of the listeners will not know what a performance director is. What is this job? What does it entail?
Well, the ultimate goal of the performance director of a performance system is to deliver Olympic and Paralympic success. That's what we're employed to do, is create a system and a program so that every 4 years we can go to the Olympic and Paralympic Games. We qualify and we medal at the Games, and we've got targets set with UK sport. It does tie into funding to a certain extent with UK sport, but it's bigger than that. The responsibility is bigger than that because it's not just the immediate 4 years. And when I took on this role in 2013, been around the sport a long time, and it was more than just what's going to happen in Rio. It was looking at the bigger picture and building a system for longer term and bringing athletes or fighters through for 2020 and beyond. So I see him very much as, it's about getting success at the Olympic and Paralympic Games. But for me, it's about creating a performance system from grassroots to the Olympic and Paralympic podiums. So eventually, when I do move on, it's not about me as the person, it's about the performance system that British still continue to have success. And whoever steps in my shoes later on as a system to take the reins of and obviously develop and take to another level for that continued success for years to come.
Thank you. And as well as your own performing experience, what qualifications or other useful background do you have to be able to do this job successfully?
Yeah, it's probably not so much qualifications per se, but it's more experience and skill set that you need. So from my point of view, I performed at a high level. And when I retired in '98, I moved into coaching. I didn't obviously become a performance director straight away. I would say I served my time over a 15, 16-year period where I coached at different levels, worked in Scotland for 7 years as a national coach there and worked mainly with cadet and juniors and supported the seniors. I've worked at club level, and they also work with the England programme at pre-cadet, cadet and junior level as well, preparing and develop athletes to ultimately prepare a medal at the Junior European Junior World Championships. But I also worked for the EIS, the English Institute of Sport, for a number of years as a performance analyst. It meant that I was analysing the best players in the world and supporting our senior athletes in the Beijing and London cycle. So it gave me a breadth of experiences across both coaching and practitioner level and pre-cadet, cadet, junior and senior level, which sort of like shaped my thinking and gave me a lot of knowledge to step into a role to become a performance director. Albeit when you do step in the role, you're not ready. I don't think you're ever ready for when you step into certain roles, and there's an element of learning because very got a lot of depth and knowledge around the sport itself. But when you step into the shoes of performance director, you start to obviously look at budget systems and working with your external stakeholders in terms of UK sport, the English Institute of Sport, British Olympic Association, British Paralympic Association, and so on. So it's having the skill set then to be able to communicate wider than the sport itself that you've grown up in for a number of years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that really insightful answer. A lot of our listeners will want to know what other sports have performance directors, and is it a role which is beyond our national British teams? So do other countries have performance directors?
Yeah, so within the UK, all sports funded by UK Sport have a performance director. They have or somebody equivalent to that role, but yeah, all sports do have a performance director, and the role of that, as I say, is not dissimilar to what I do in their sport. It might differ slightly depending on the dynamic and the setup of the sport. You know, we have a home nation program, we have a full pathway, so links to England, Scotland, and Wales as part of that. Some sports don't have that sort of pathway established, so it's just a performance program that the performance director.
Who are you actually funded by?
We're funded by UK Sport. So every cycle we have to submit our strategy and our plan. And even though we're still currently in the Tokyo cycle, albeit it's been extended by a year, even if the Tokyo Olympic Games were taking place this year and the Paralympic Games, we're in the process of putting together what you call our post-Tokyo submission. So what's our plans for the next 12 years? And what's our funding requirements to achieve those goals, certainly in the immediate 4 years? And we're working with UK Sport, as all sports are at this moment in time, and there's a process that UK Sport have put in place to submit those plans with checkpoints and review points, where ultimately we would find out what our funding would be for the next 4 years. So, for example, our Tokyo cycle funding is 8.6 million for the 4 years across the Olympic and Paralympic program, where some sports are funded up to over 30 million for a 4-year cycle. It just depends on the sport and where you're banded and where you're graded with UK Sport and what you can actually ultimately deliver at the Olympic and the Paralympic Games. And also then the quality of your plan that you've put in place as well. And considering our strategy and our plan is very, very strong. And 8.6 million, it goes a reasonable way. But we, like all sports, we'd always want more. And that's what we'll be bidding for in the next cycle.
Okay, thanks. That makes perfect sense. So basically your funding is linked to an Olympic cycle. Does your funding relate to how many medals you've scored in the last, or secured in the last Olympics, as well as your strategy?
It's part of it. So obviously the purpose of the performance system is to deliver Olympic and Paralympic success. So And also in between a 4-year cycle, you have a European and World Championships as well each year, which sort of tracks and benchmarks your level of performance through the cycle. But ultimately, you're being fun to deliver success on the each 4 years. So yeah, it is part of that. But then also the part of that is the quality of your submission, that you can sustain that success at the next Olympic and Paralympic Games and so forth. So yeah, success in the immediate cycle is part of it, but also the quality of your program for the next cycle is also part of that, what will determine your level of funding going forwards.
Brilliant, thank you. And within your program, how many athletes do you look after?
It's quite a comprehensive program. We're a fully centralised program where we have a national training centre based in Walsall, London University of Wolverhampton campus, and we have our own purpose training facility, which has got the dojo, which is the mat and the gym and the science and medicine facilities around it and offices. So training full time now across the Olympic and Paralympic, we've got 40 athletes from age 18 years of age through to the older athletes who are, touching the high 20s, early 30s. So yeah, 40 full-time athletes that we work with on a day-to-day basis. But then we have a wider program in terms of our GB squad, which is part of our pathway, and we can have up to 100 athletes coming in to train at any one time. But our day-to-day work is focused on those 40 athletes.
So there's a lot of people to get to know. How do you help these athletes fulfill their Olympic dream? There's a lot of them.
Yeah, well, they're all at different stages. So what I would say that obviously in our program, we've got our Tokyo group, which are obviously preparing to qualify and eventually medal at the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. But we're already working with the next generation of young athletes that will potentially qualify for Paris and potentially go to Los Angeles in 2028. So they're at different stages. So we call them what you call individual athlete plans. So when the athletes come on the program, we profile the athletes and where they're at that stage and what the needs are technically, physically, and so on. We've got a technical program or profile where we expect them to be, and we've also got a performance benchmark program where we expect them to be by the time the top end juniors as a 20-year-old, and where they need to be in the senior program by the time they're 22 and 23. And the programs then wrapped around that sort of profiling that we put in place to support each of the athletes. And on top of that, we also look after the long-term development of the athlete that, eventually they will retire. And we also encourage them to study, and being on the university campus provides educational opportunities. Some do study there, but some are not, and they're studying at various colleges or universities in and around of where we're based. But we have a performance lifestyle advisor, and those roles are predominantly to look at the long-term development of the athletes so that when they do eventually retire, they've got something to go on to after the competition career.
Okay, fantastic. That links really well to the next question which I have, which is what other professionals apart from yourself do the athletes have to support them and guide them and help them achieve their quest?
Yeah, so we've got 6 full-time coaches that are obviously taking care of the day-to-day technical work and taking them around the world to compete. But support the team, we've got a comprehensive sports science and medicine team with 2 full-time physios and 1 dedicated to athlete health and well-being, full-time strength conditioning coach, and then we've got a nutritionist, psychologist, welfare advisor. We've got links with the university. We can access the resource that they've got around physiology. They've got an altitude or climate chamber that's been built that we can tap into when we get back into the facility. So yeah, a very comprehensive team wrapped around the athletes on a day-to-day basis to help make sure that they stay physically fit and well, technically develop them. We're a dual career program, so we'll look after their obviously when they eventually do retire, and also support the mental health and well-being as part of the rocky road of being an elite athlete.
Absolutely, I can see this peaks and troughs for everyone through this process. That's amazing. So they have a full support network. If you look at all those different areas, they are at every avenue where they might turn. They might have someone there with massive expertise and great guidance. And I presume those professionals are also funded by UK Sport.
Yeah, so all our staff, they're either all the coaches are full-time, and a number of our science and medicine team are also full-time, and some are then contracted on a part-time basis, 2 to 3 days per week, depending on the needs of what the program is. Obviously, in an ideal world, we would be able to employ some of those directly on a full-time basis, but we've only got so much funding. and we have to prioritize. The fundamental training unit of performance judo is what I'll call randori, and that's the Japanese term, but basically sparring. And the quality of practice is critical. And we've developed what we call a global randori program or global sparring program. So we spend a lot of time traveling around the world, training in different countries with different nations or on various training camps. And fundamentally, that's the greatest cost to our program. And that's where we need to invest heavily to get the athletes better. And ultimately, when we're putting the plans together or costing the program out, competition and training camps are our greatest cost, and everything else has to wrap around that, and prioritizing what staff would be more important than others to a certain extent in terms of what we can afford. But on the whole, the athletes are very, very well supported with the program we offer, and also the resource wrapped around them to help them to become the best in the world.
Well, it certainly sounds like this is a big job. I think, given your experience, I'd love to know, how do you think judo as an Olympic sport has changed over your involvement?
I would say over the last 6-7 years, we've obviously moved to a full-time centralized environment, and it goes against what we've been as a sport for the last 20-30 years. We've probably been what we call a club national based program. And certainly that's where I grew up in the 80s and 90s, where you could train in your club or various clubs, compete at national level and international level, and be successful. But the landscape of world judo has dramatically changed over the last, even the last 10 years. There are more nations now doing the sport. The standard is far higher, and also the quality of support day to day wrapped around you the need is far greater. So the last 6-7 years, we've gone from like a club national based program to a fully centralized program, and embedding that into the GB performance system has taken some time, because you probably can understand that older athletes who've trained in the club environment for a number of years, to ask them to relocate at 26, 27 is more difficult than asking an 18-year-old at the start of the career. It provides a different prospect for them. So we've had to drip feed the centralized program over a number of years through the cycle, where now we are fully centralized. And I think that's definitely had the biggest impact on the sport overall, where now it's recognized that, when you are growing up and you are coming through the performance system, you eventually move into a centralized environment if you are going to become the best you can possibly be.
The final question then, Nigel, if you could change one rule in judo, what would it be and why?
But the rules have changed over the last 10-12 years from a technical perspective, and I think they've changed for the better. And I think our sport has become a really good spectacle now. And what the International Judo Federation, the World Federation for the governing body for the sport, they want to make judo spectacular. They want to call ippon winning judo. So in boxing terms, they want to see more knockouts. They want to see more fights won by ippon. And I think the rule changes have certainly helped that to a very certain degree. But for me, where I'd like to see is probably changing the scoring and how it's presented in terms of on the scoreboard. So we use a lot of Japanese terminology where ippon and wazari scores and penalties deemed as shidos. And what you would see on the scoreboard would go from like a 1 to a 1/0. And I'd like to see like an accumulative scoring system where you both start at 0-0. It's first 1 to 10, and a penalty might be a 1. A wazari class as 5 points, the ippon class as 10. But for example, if you have a wazari score on me and I throw you for a wazari, it's 5-all. But then if you get a penalty, it's 6-5, and so on. And I think that would be a lot easier for the general public who don't understand the sport to see a scoring system in place. And other than that, I think the rule changes are really positive that have been put in place. But yeah, just around the scoring system and how it's presented would be my only sort of amendment I'd like to see to the sport.
Thank you so much. And in terms of passing any last comments of wise wisdom to our students in terms of encouragement to how they can perhaps achieve their potential in a more fruitful way or a more determined way, what wise words would you give our students to make the best of their potential?
Well, it's probably not simple. It's same for all sports. You've got to work hard and keep working hard. And we're all born with a certain level of genetics or ability. But at the end of the day, I think there's a true saying. Somebody said, it's 90% effort and 10% talent, and everybody will have a different level of talent. But talent doesn't mean anything if you don't work hard, and that doesn't matter. That's not just in sport. That goes in any walk of life. And the foundation for success for me in anything is just that you have to work hard and give it your best shot. And where it's a sporting context, is always give it your best and have no regrets when you do eventually get to the end of your career. And I always look back and said, well, I gave it everything, I committed everything, I took every opportunity. So yeah, I think that would be the sort of, if I could give anything in terms of like wisdom, I think those will be the key components.
Well, I think that fits perfectly. Thank you so much for allowing us to connect with the world of judo, but more importantly, within your role as a performance director, we've had a lot of performance on the WoodPods, and it's fantastic to connect with a professional who's working with Olympic sport outside of performance. So how can we follow the British judo team in their lead up to Tokyo?
But we've got good social media channels. So we've got a website, the British Judo website. But within that, we've also got Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, and Facebook accounts. If you find them, and there's a lot of social media that goes on. And if you look at the moment, our athletes are doing a fantastic job, the Olympic and the Paralympic guys, in terms of posting training sessions that they're doing. So, all right, we're currently in lockdown, and it's very severe. And the primary message is that stay home, stay safe, protect our NHS, and eventually, hopefully, everybody returns back to our performance environment safe and well. But in this period, working from home or training from home, we want the athletes to inspire the judo community, both nationally and internationally, and doing a really good job of that. So yeah, if you go onto our social media accounts, you'll see some fantastic work that all the guys are doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis.
Fantastic. Well, we have a very fast growing sporting community at NLCS, and we look forward to watching your athletes in action. Good luck to you and your team in Tokyo. We hope it goes well for you, and we hope to see you in action very, very soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nicola.
Join us next week as we stick with the theme of Olympic professionals and welcome Jack Grundy onto the show. Jack is a lifestyle coach with the experience of not one but two Olympic sports, working with both the GB Olympic sailing and the GB Paralympic fencing team. We look at the transferable skills of the role, and we ask, what would it take for one of our students to follow a similar path? Thanks for listening.